So I was reviewing my channel analytics and I saw that my most watched videos are my technical videos on DAZ Trader. So I thought I might do a video diving into writing functions within DAZ. I'll start with a quick refresher on what functions are, compare them to how you might use them in the real world, and then walk you through writing a similar function within DAZ. So what is a function? A function is simply a small segment of code that can be called or executed by other parts of code. I like to think of them as containers. You can use a function to contain complex logic to break it down into smaller segments where each segment would be contained within the function. Functions could also be used to do repeatable tasks, so instead of writing code over and over again, you could simply write a function and then call that function within your code. Many of you are probably familiar with Excel's sum function, where the sum function adds multiple numbers, which are variables, together and creates a new total variable as the output. So in this example, we have the variable num1, which is 5, and num2, which is 2, and we are adding both of those numbers together using the sum function, where we pass num1 and num2 variables into the sum function, which will add them together, outputting a new total variable of 7. So how would we write this Excel sum function in code? So I'll first do an example of it using JavaScript, and then I'll write the same function within DAZ. So within JavaScript, you first define it as a function, and we will call this sum. It takes in two parameters, num1 and num2. Then you put some brackets around it, which is the container block. And then you have to declare the variables. In JavaScript, we declare them as const, which means constant. And we're going to say total, which is our new variable, is equal to the first variable plus the second variable. Then in JavaScript, we can return the total. Additionally, before we do that, we could do a console log in order to log the output of total. So we'll say total is equal to the output of total. Just putting this in a string, and it's going to output the total variable. So if I were to run this, you could see I actually have to call this sum function here, and then we're going to pass in 5 and 7. And so you can see that the output was 12, and we used the example before where we pass in 5 and 2, it will output the total is 7. So how would we convert this JavaScript function into a DAZ function? So the first thing is you need to have a hotkey file. You can also do this within DAZ itself, which I'll show you in a second. But I like to maintain all of my code within a hotkey file. So we will just copy from the brackets up until the name of the function and paste that into a new file. And so in DAZ, we don't use brackets, so we will just remove both of these brackets. And we actually don't need variables. We don't use variables as parameters neither. And what we actually have to do is put a colon around both between the function. This will be the name of your function within DAZ. And then we have these constants, these variables. So again, in DAZ, we don't use constant. Instead, we use dollar signs to represent a variable. And the other thing is we don't actually pass in variables as parameters at all, which means that DAZ does not actually support parameters as of right now. I am working with them on potentially adding this in the future, but as of right now, you just have to declare them as global variables. So we will actually declare these as variables that exist inside of DAZ, And then we have to, then we'll take our total, and then we'll do the same thing. We're going to reference number one variable and then number two variable. We will create a new variable called total. And then we will, instead of doing a console log, what Daz calls it is a message box. So you see here, this is message box, does the exact same thing. It will actually just show us a pop-up, and you can actually do message log as well, and this will output a log to the log file inside of your Daz logging if you use that. But we'll just use message box for this purpose. Now the return statement, Daz does support returns, but it doesn't return anything. It more is like a break statement where it will stop executing the code. So for instance, if you said like new variable here, it would not actually hit this code inside of Daz because it would exit out of this function as a return. I am asking Daz to be able to support returning of variables so that it would solve a bunch of problems. But as of right now, they don't support returning, but hopefully they will in the future. So this is what our function would look like. We actually don't need return. So we'll just say total is equal to num1, num2, and then we will simply output that. And so I forgot to mention a couple of things. First of all, you cannot have these variables declared at the top of your hotkey file. You actually have to create a separate hotkey in Daz, which I will show you how to do. So for now, we'll just remove that. The other thing is everything must be on one line. So you actually have to put everything in line in one line and make sure that you have a semicolon following each of your statements. If you have this inside of just Daz itself, you can have lines, the code on each line. But if you use a hotkey file like this, they must be on a single line. I actually can maintain a separate file which I call hotkey expanded, which is just a JavaScript version of the hotkey file, and then I strip out all the JavaScript and then reduce it down into a single line, and I maintain both files, maintain parity, and I do this just to make the code much more readable. The last thing, well, two more things I forgot to mention. Number one is you must also have a empty space at the end of your hotkey file, otherwise it will not read the last hotkey that you have in the file. So you should always have a empty line at the end. And then the final thing is you actually want to put in a hotkey on your keyboard that you're going to press in order to execute this hotkey. So if you want to do that, you would want to do like Control+1, for instance, and that would give you the keyboard command in order to call this function. So with that being said, let's jump over into Daz. You'll go into Setup, Hotkey, and then Hotkey, and we will just go and import the hotkey sum file. So you can see that the name of the hotkey is sum, the key itself is +1, Control+1, and then this is our hotkey. So as I mentioned before, you'll actually have to create a new hotkey. So we'll name this like a Control2, and we'll just call it like test2, or we can call it like a init variable or something like that. And so this is going to say num1. Num1 is equal to 5, and then num2 is equal to 2. These are going to be our two variables, so you always must declare your variables in another hotkey. So this could be another function, or maybe you can just have global variables that you initialize somewhere else, but the variables must be declared, and then like I said, you can't pass variables into a function directly, but rather they're just kind of variables that you reference within a function. So we will just commit this, and then we will press Control 2. And then if we go into our hotkey and variable, you can see that we have num1 and num2 that has been created now. And then if you go back into our hotkey and we said, it's Control 1, so I would just press Control 1, and it says total. That's not good. Probably messed this whole thing up. I did. So you must have a $sign for each of your variables. So that's fine. Good learning experience here. We just go to setup, hotkey, and then hotkey again. And then we will browse, just re-import the updated code. The important thing now, if you choose to add, this is why I maintain all of my code within the hotkey file. If you change anything through DAS directly, but you're maintaining your code within a file, anytime you import that new file, all of your DAS related code goes away. So yeah, all of my hotkeys, I don't add any hotkeys directly through the system. I always add it through my hotkey file. That way I can make changes and maintain it through a code repository such as GitHub and not worry about losing any of my code. So this is fine. I actually don't need those variables anymore because they
alert market C imbalance, time greater equal 15:49:0.
Just getting alerts here. Ignore all that too. This video is going to crap, but I'm going to press Control 1 here, and then we have total 7. So this is just going to be adding those two variables together. All right, so the final thing we need to do is create another hotkey that will then execute this function over and over again. So I'll actually remove this hotkey, and we'll just use this. We'll call this we'll call add num1 or something like that. This is just going to be the name of the hotkey, and then we're going to say execute hotkey, and then put it in quotes, and we will put the name of the function that we're calling. So this is going to be sum because that's what the name of the function is declared here. And so basically what this hotkey is going to do is it will simply just call this function. So here we could say like num1, these variables, num1 is equal to 5, and num2 is equal to 2, like we had before, which will give us a 7. And we're just going to copy this, and then we'll just change the variables over here. So there's going to be a separate hotkey. This will be 2, and we'll call a adding 2, whatever, just a different name. And then we'll change this to like, I don't know, maybe 10 and 5, something like that. And then we'll just call it again. So the point is we have these variables. We are changing the these variables, and then each hotkey is going to call the exact same function with having different parameters, and so we would expect a different output. So again, make sure that your hotkey ends in a space, and then we will just go back into setup, import that new file. And so now you see here that we have some function which does not have a hotkey, and then we have two new hotkeys. We have num1 is equal to 5 and 2, and then 10 and 5. So we will just call these Control 1 here, outputs total is 7, whereas Control 2 will output a total of 15. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any questions about anything I mentioned here. I know we covered a lot. And then let me know as well as if this stuff is helpful, and if you guys have anything that you would maybe want me to do a video on in the future. Thanks.